Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Solo Spooky Story. My name's Rob, and today I'll be your host. For those of you who don't know, the Solo Spooky Stories are shorter episodes where it's just myself hosting it, just kind of talking to you, almost like a story, I suppose, discussing a topic that I find interesting or doesn't necessarily have enough information for a full-on episode. So, I use these as opportunities to provide shorter episodes to the people who like them, and they're usually about 10 to 15 minutes. With that said, I hope you're all having a lovely day whenever it is that you're listening to this. I personally see a lot of people saying that they like to have a cup of coffee with this in the mornings, listening on a Friday. We have episodes coming out every Friday at 6 a.m. Irish time, so whenever that is at your time, hopefully it's suitable for a cup of coffee. But with that said, I hope you enjoy this next episode that we're doing, which is the Fox sisters. So I knew about these just kind of anecdotally. I'd heard about them before. I was kind of interested in them. They're effectively kind of the first, I suppose, celebrities in the world of spiritualism and kind of mediums and kind of leading into the occult. I find them fascinating because they're these two younger girls that effectively took the world, or at least kind of the States and Western Europe, by storm, and inspired various famous figures in history, including Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. I think he's probably the most famous person that was aware of and directly impacted and influenced by these people. So yeah, I just wanted to give a short episode just kind of talking about them and what it is that they're all about, and the story that they ultimately bring with them. So it was a cold and blustery night in late March 1848 when the Fox family first encountered the mysterious phenomenon that would change their lives forever. The wind held outside their modest home in Hydesville, New York. As the family settled in for the evening, Maggie, who was 14, and Kate was 11, huddled together in their shared bedroom. For nights now at this point, they had been plagued by strange noises and whisperings that they just couldn't explain, and they just felt that they effectively had enough. They said that the raps and knocks that seemed to come from the very walls and furniture around them were growing louder and more insistent with each passing night. So on this eventual night in late March 1848, they decided to confront the source of the sounds. So as night set and as the room darkened, with a mixture of fear and determination, Maggie called out, "If you are a spirit, please rap 3 times." To their astonishment, 3 distinct knocks answered her command. The girls' eyes widened in terror and excitement as they realized they were communicating with something otherworldly. The next morning, the Fox sisters shared their experience with their mother, who was both skeptical and intrigued. She decided to test the spirit herself, asking it to count the number of her children. 6 raps echoed throughout the room, correctly answering her question. Word of the haunting quickly spread through their small community, drawing curious neighbors to witness the phenomenon, and the Fox sisters' home effectively became a hub of activity with people eager to experience the mysterious raps for themselves. So as the days passed, the spirit's identity was seemingly revealed through a series of questions and answers. It claimed to be the ghost of a poor person who had been murdered and buried in the cellar of the Fox's home. This chilling revelation only heightened the public's fascination with the sisters' abilities. The girls continued to communicate with the spirit, refining their method of using raps to answer yes or no questions. Their story captivated the public's imagination, marking the beginning of their journey into the world of spiritualism. The Fox's sisters' ability to produce these rapping sounds led to widespread curiosity and skepticism, and their demonstrations were initially confined to their home, but as word soon spread, they began to perform in larger venues. The simplicity of their method, using a series of knocks to communicate, made it accessible and easily replicable, which contributed to its rapid spread. The sisters' youth and apparent innocence also played a significant role in convincing people of the authenticity of their claims. So that was just kind of a little intro piece. I just had a bit of fun writing. I hope you enjoyed it. It's been a while since I've actually just kind of written something, so just let my mind run with that. But yes, the Fox sisters claim to have heard this noise over multiple nights in their home, and claimed to their mother that it was just basically haunting them, as I said, and developed this, I suppose, method of communication that they called rapping, which is obviously not to be confused with the modern definition. This version of rapping was you asked a yes or no question, and the ghost or spirit or whatever you want to call it would respond with 1 knock for yes, 2 knocks for no, or some variation of that. So by answering a series of yes-no questions, they could determine the identity of the spirit or whatever it was that was in the room with them. So a really kind of like basic method of communication, but one that ultimately worked quite well, and one that we've seen replicated throughout history. So naturally, as these things happen, especially in the mid 19th century, the world of spiritualism and the occult and mediums and seances was, I would say, pretty much at its height. Like, it was kind of initially like a parlor game, I suppose, like the Ouija boards and things like that, but they soon became very, very popular, like very prominent, you know, and like there's a whole other world in there, like tarot cards and everything that I'm not getting into today, but the world was like, especially Western Europe anyway, and like the States was like primed for this. So naturally, this Fox sisters just became this, like, I suppose, perfect example of spiritualism, and became this, like, just stars, I suppose, of the world. So especially with how young they were obviously very believable. So as the news of this Fox sisters' abilities spread, they were invited to demonstrate their skills in various cities, which is fairly mad when you think about how they've come from this small town in New York to all of a sudden traveling around cities in the States performing. And that's kind of what it was. It became this sort of like performance rather than, I suppose, a personal seance or something like that. They played to audiences. Like, they literally played to crowds, like just playing in stadiums effectively, you know. People would come from all around to come see them, and I suppose see them talking to the dead. So their older sister Leah, who lived in Rochester in New York, saw, I suppose, potential for a profitable venture with them, and she joined the two of them. So she managed their public appearances and helped to organize these seances that they held, where the sisters would communicate with spirits for paying audiences. That's the key part to it, that they didn't do this for free. Audiences would have to pay for it. So the events drew, as I said, huge crowds and fairly significant media attention as well, which only further fueled the public's fascination with spiritualism. So the Fox sisters' fame grew as they traveled, and they performed from New York to Philadelphia and various other places in between. And they actually attracted the attention of quite prominent figures, including journalists, scientists, some skeptics. They all kind of attended their seances to witness the phenomena firsthand and to kind of throw their 2 cents at it. So, you know, naturally with all of this, there was a lot of skepticism, and accusations of fraud were being thrown around. But despite this, the Fox sisters managed to maintain a fairly significant following. Like, we're talking large here. People were paying them a lot of money to do and showcase their skills. People genuinely believed what they were doing. So their performances, while they were initially quite basic, I suppose, like they were out of their house initially, you know, people would pay $1 in or something to see them talk to the dead. At this point, when they're traveling to cities, their performances were, as I saw described, dramatic. So they were allegedly so dramatic that spirits would provide detailed messages and supposedly even physical manifestations, such as moving objects or cold breezes in the room, which just added to this overall kind of mystique and kind of allure to their specific seances. You know, they were the real deal. They were showing people that, no, like, fucking look at this, like, there's spooky lads in here, you know, they're showing up, they're answering your questions, like, we're the real deal. So I mentioned earlier their older sister Leah, like, she played a fairly crucial role in managing their public appearances and the seances. She basically professionalized seances, and by doing this, basically, like, catapulted them into stardom. So the sisters' ability to produce rapping sounds on command and this kind of apparent communication with spirits captivated audiences. And yeah, like, as I said, the detailed messages that they would provide basically made it a point that they were so detailed and so kind of clear in what they were saying that people were like, there's no way that they could be faking this. Like, they are the real deal. So, you know, I can see why people would believe this. So as I said, they were prominent in the popular kind of public opinion, like the media was involved, scientists, things like that. But on the other hand, they also became prominent in the spiritualist movement. So Andrew Jackson Davis, who was a well-known medium and author, apparently was actually quite interested in what they were doing. And by them becoming associated with these kind of well-known people in the movement, this actually kind of helped to further legitimize their claims, and as a kind of knock-on effect, further popularize spiritualism as a whole. So I'm not going to go fully into the spiritualism movement, but, you know, if you're interested in it, you should look into it further. We will do a kind of a follow-on episode, a main episode between myself and Suze, talking about spiritualism in much more detail. But it can't be you can't state enough how much the Fox sisters' influence extended beyond their lifetimes, because spiritualism from this kind of point onwards continued to evolve, adapt, and kind of changed social and cultural contexts. Like they basically, you could say that their kind of popularity has led right through to the now kind of continued popularity of mediumship and paranormal investigations in, I suppose, modern culture. So, despite their success, it's understandable that there would be a lot of criticism and controversy around them as well. And the sisters faced considerable skepticism and multiple accusations of fraud, as I said earlier. Critics kind of argued that the rapping sounds could be easily faked, and they tried to kind of have various investigations around this to prove their hunches that they were correct. And, they were fairly kind of unsuccessful in proving that what the Fox sisters was doing was fraud. However, in 1888, so we're talking, 40 years basically after they first kind of catapulted into the modern world of spiritualism. In 1888, Maggie Fox publicly confessed that the rapping sounds were a hoax. And she said that basically they were able to create the sounds by cracking their toe joints, which is absolutely disgusting, but also mad impressive. Like, these girls could basically crack their toe joints loud enough that people in like concert halls could hear them. Really impressive stuff. And apparently she demonstrated the technique to a public audience, basically explaining to them how they'd fooled people for years. And, it kind of immediately brought into question the credibility of the entire spiritualist movement. Like, this was a huge deal that basically one of the poster children basically of spiritualism came out and was like, nah, it's all bullshit. We've been fooling you for 40 years. It did not go down well. And yeah, the credibility of the spiritualist movement definitely was dealt a blow with this one. But interestingly enough, Maggie, a time later, actually recanted her confession, which I just find mad that she was like, no, like, it is fake. And then a few years later was like, actually, do you know what? It isn't fake. And what she said was she was coerced into it by detractors of spiritualism. So basically her enemies forced her to confess that it was all a lie, which I love. I absolutely love this. People were so invested in it that they somehow coerced her into demonstrating her skills to a public audience, actually showing them how she's fooled them, but then backpedals and is like, actually, you know what? No, it's not true. I love this. Like, the audacity is fantastic. So yeah, this kind of on again, off again sort of image didn't help the sisters' reputations, and it pretty much scuppered any sort of legacy that they had. It kind of, I suppose you could say, it cast a shadow over their legacy. It wouldn't be unfair to say that. Like, it really did damage their reputation. But despite the controversy, many other followers actually continued to believe in their abilities, and ultimately the movement that they had started to grow. So yeah, it's just really, really interesting that it kind of, their story kind of highlights this tension between the belief and skepticism that's kind of always surrounded spiritualism and modern day, I suppose, paranormal phenomena. But yeah, it's just really, I just find it fascinating how something so simple kind of catapulted them into the public light. And, you could say, and some people have said, like some critics have argued that the sisters had exploited people's grief and vulnerability to basically for their own financial gain. And I completely agree with that. Others, the ones who believe them, and still I think some do believe them still, have kind of seen them as these almost like pioneers who opened up these kind of new possibilities for understanding the afterlife. And like, a debate is still very much so going on today. Like, there are some people who still firmly believe that they were what they said they were, and then obviously a large other group of people saying like, well, they've admitted to being a hoax, so there's enough evidence for you right there. It's just, I find it really interesting. But yeah, like, as I said, they made this significant impact on spiritualism, like, cannot be understated enough. Like, it kind of almost became this like religious and I suppose cultural force in the 19th and even 20th centuries. And like, the methods that they adopted, the rapping and all that, and the talking, and that basically became the handbook for mediums going forward. Like, people who claim to communicate with the dead, people who still claim to communicate with the dead, use these techniques. So like, it can't be understated enough how much of an impact they made on this. And I suppose they landed at probably the perfect time in history, in that the Civil War was right around the corner when they became popular, and World War One wasn't that far off either. So there were many people willing to pay a lot of money to talk to dead loved ones, and these girls were right there for it. So yeah, it's super, super interesting story. Like, obviously I've not really kind of joked about it as much. I just find it fascinating. They basically just popularized the idea that communication with the dead was possible. And yeah, as I said, people like Arthur Conan Doyle believe this fully, like so much so that he allegedly, when he died, said that he would actually return to a public setting to show people that communicating with the dead was possible. He was that certain that when he died, that it was just a case of being able to return and communicate. So, it's just really cool that they managed to just basically change the public's opinion on this huge thing and popularizing like what is now effectively become an industry. So I just find it really, really interesting, and I hope you have as well. Like, as I said, almost kind of a bit more of a serious tone to this one, but I just find it really interesting that these two girls, or three girls I suppose, just changed the world effectively. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and where you come down on it. Do you think that they were actually, communicating with the dead, or do you think it was a hoax? As I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You can let us know at Instagram at the SpookyAF Pod, or on Gmail at the SpookyAFpodcast@gmail.com. You can get us on YouTube as well in the comments. All of our episodes go up there now, so you can let us know what you think there as well. But yeah, whenever it is you're listening to this, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.